So congressional Democrats
very kind.
have formally responded to the reports that Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigators were frustrated that Attorney General William Barr's public letter on their report excluded damaging information about President Trump. An official telling the Washington Post that summaries were prepared for different sections of the report with a view that they could be made public. And two people telling the Post that Barr not releasing them has particularly disappointed team members. This is important because who would put together a report, especially Bob Mueller, without creating sections that you can release to the press that really help encapsulate all the work that's been done?
Right.
And a senior law enforcement official who has spoken to members of Mueller's team tells NBC News that the report includes detailed accounts of Trump campaign contacts with Russia, and that while Mueller found no coordination or criminal conspiracy, the official said, some on the special counsel's team say his findings paint a picture of a campaign whose members were manipulated by a sophisticated Russian intelligence operation, some of which may be classified. Now,
wait, let's just stop right there. Let's just stop right there.
Yeah, let's do that.
So really, we're going to be getting in a moment to the fact that Donald Trump received absolutely no bounce from this William Barr attempt, sort of Roy Cohn attempt to whitewash his client. He got no bump whatsoever. And I actually think reading these stories show what many of us expected at the time, that the Trump team and right-wingers on Twitter would overplay their hands. And they have overplayed their hands. I mean, there's evidence that's going to be coming out from this Mueller report that, again, shows what we all know, that the Trump campaign, the Trump team, the Trump family were manipulated by members of either the Russian government or Russian intelligence. And Barr's sanitized version of that, again, in the long run, it does Trump no good. It sets expectations too high, and we could probably even expect those poll numbers to actually go down once we actually find out the truth about what's in Mueller's report.
It's what we've been saying all along. Release the report, release the report, release the report. Make the necessary redactions like you would any other document that has classified information or grand jury testimony, but release the report. And the Attorney General has agreed to do that. What's interesting about some of these stories, including the one from NBC News and the New York Times story from Michael Schmidt and his team yesterday, is that the people that the reporters heard from inside the special counsel's office through other associates did not dispute the claim of no collusion. They agreed that Bob Mueller could not find evidence of a conspiracy between the Trump campaign and the Russians. But there is publicly available information reporting that we've seen. We know about the meeting at Trump Tower between Don Jr. and Russians. We know about all these things that are out in the open that point to some kind of cooperation between these two entities. So we just need to see the report and all that's in there. And I trust with the pressure that's being put on, Attorney General Barr will do that.
Well, yeah, and by the way, it's not just collusion, which, by the way, everybody said beforehand was not a crime, or a conspiracy, but it could be cooperation. Yeah. It could be, more importantly, compromise. But, you know, Mike, the thing that is so disturbing about what William Barr is doing is, here's yet another person who is trashing their reputation in the name of Donald Trump, another person who, my God, where has he been the past couple of years, will exit the White House, sorry that he had trashed his reputation for Donald Trump. His argument, and I say this, I've never said this before on television, so this is going to shock some people. Sit down, everybody. I was in Congress.
Wow.
His argument that members of, hey, listen, I don't want to talk about it. I was a public servant, and I don't want to use the fact that I was a public servant on television. No, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. But I was in Congress. What? It was an incredible ride. I know, I got to tell you, I was staring at Newt Gingrich at this one point. I'm saying, let me tell you something. Okay. The American people first.
You're making a good point.
Anyway, so I'm making my point. So it is such a joke for William Barr, the Attorney General, to say, oh, we can't allow this information to go over to Congress because some of it is classified. Hey, Mike, as you know and as I know, members of Congress We look at classified information every day. It's not up for the Attorney General to decide what classified information Nancy Pelosi's grown up enough to see. It's not up to the Attorney General to decide whether the chairman of the Judiciary Committee can handle classified information. It's not up to him to decide whether Elijah Cummings on government reform and oversight of the executive branch can look at that classified information. They've looked at a lot more important classified information every day this week, as it pertains to foreign policy, as it pertains to national security. He needs to just give it up and let members of Congress see the entire report like we did when Ken Starr released the entire report to Congress.
Well, first of all, Joe, we're all sort of nonplussed here. We're
I don't want to talk
unaware
about
of your
it.
background.
I got that. No, I don't want to talk about it.
Having
No.
spoken this week to several current members of Congress, both of the House and the Senate, I am told repeatedly that Barr's it's basically three-page statement that he issued 2 weekends ago, seriously misleads people about the report itself. That within the report, again, I'm told that Mueller has laid out sections of the report and brief précis explaining sections of the report and what can be included and what can't be, what could be made public. He has not done that yet. And on the essence of the conspiracy aspect of it that you were talking about, it basically comes down to, and you referenced this, Donald Jr. saying, "I love it," sounds odd, sounds complicit, but it's not illegal. Encouraging the Russians, being duped by the Russians, is not indictable. On the obstruction path, I'm told that there are serious building blocks of evidence that basically Bob Mueller and his team put together, and the presentation in the report to Congress is, here's what we found. You decide. You decide what you want to do with it in the House.
Let me just say this. Those two paths are not different paths, right? The obstruction path affects Mueller's ability to investigate the collusion path, and people are treating them as separate entities. In fact, they're all the same thing. I will add this, though. Yes, it's very difficult, obviously, to legally prove collusion, but Joe was talking about compromise. And we have not just the Mueller report now, but we have an attempt to obtain Donald Trump's tax filings. And these are two efforts to get documents that could illuminate the degree to which Trump's business dealings may have intersected with Russian national interests. And so until we get this voluminous amount of information, I think we can't really jump to any conclusions, whether it's, yes, there was collusion, or Barr's conclusion that, in fact, there was nothing there. And the only question that I'm lingering with is, and maybe there was a legal reason that he had to do this, is why Barr went so quickly with this. Was there something that he felt
There was
compelled?
no legal reason.
Okay, that's what I assumed. I assumed there was a PR reason.
There's no legal reason whatsoever. The reason is that Donald Trump has been wanting a Roy Cohn. He has stated it publicly. He's wanted a Roy Cohn as an attorney general who put his personal interests ahead of the interests of the country. Yeah. He has found that with Robert Barr, because Susan Del Persia, you know, there are far more important standards than just legal standards. There is the standard of what is best for the public interest. There are standards that involve what the public has a right to know. If the President of the United States was compromised by Russia, it may not be a crime, but it impacts 330 million Americans. If Donald Trump and his campaign coordinated with Russia, it could be legal. It could be morally wrong. But more important than that, it could be dangerous. We Americans, are you listening, Mr. Attorney General? Are you listening, Mitch McConnell? We Americans have a right to know if our president was compromised in any way, and we have a right to know the nature of the relationship between the government of Russia and oligarchs outside of Russia and attorneys connected with the Russian government and our president. And just because it doesn't reach a certain legal threshold does not mean for one moment that every single American has a right to see that report. Susan, I'll let you take it from there.
Well, I agree with that, obviously. But what's also really important to remember is that we also need to learn what happened so it doesn't happen again. The Russians found a naive campaign, you can argue, and they infiltrated it potentially, and there was the collusion that went on. Whether it's legal or not, that was a separate question. But we know Russia interfered with our elections. We know we have another one coming up next year. There's so much in that report that, I mean, we don't know what we don't know, but at the same time, the way this has been handled by the Attorney General has been shameful. Now, I realize that there was a rush to get the first memo out, but at the same time, people were demanding it. So I almost understand it, except then they had to release the report right after, because this timeline is just unacceptable. And I think that there will be a lot of information that comes out in that report that the public will be shocked to know, because there's so much already baked in, whether it be no collusion that the president's been saying for the last 2 years,
right,
or the other public information like the meeting with in Trump Tower. But what about the things we don't know? That could be a real shell shock for the American public.
There's a lot of questions about the way the Attorney General handled it, and we need to know if it was unacceptable. And I think when we get to see, and we should be able to see, the parts of the report that the Mueller team prepared for the media, and if they don't match up with the Attorney General's letter, then we got a problem. And keep in mind, the Attorney General did include a quote saying this is not an exoneration in his summary, or whatever you want to call it. It is Trump who is lying about this report being a complete exoneration and branding it as that. As Joe mentioned, he was in Congress a week after Attorney General William Barr's summary of Robert Mueller's report was published. President Trump has not seen any impact in the polls. His branding is just, I don't know what's going on.
It's not working. People know it's a cover-up.
As Steve Kornacki points out in his new piece for NBC News, according to the Real Clear Politics Tracker, Trump's average approval rating has climbed only 1/10 of 1 percentage point, from 43.1% to 43.2% a week later. Meanwhile, every one of Trump's modern presidential predecessors saw their approval rating cross 60% at some point during their first term, but Trump cannot seem to get close to 50%. Donnie, is his, I mean, on a serious note, you know a bit about branding. This president brands information about himself. He brands it, and much of it is lies. What is happening to this branding exercise as it pertains to Mueller? What's your best guess?
There's two numbers. There's 37 and there's 45, and that seems to be the polls as far as the axes is. Whereas Trump doesn't get any lower, he doesn't get any higher. My concern, not my concern, my cynical view of the Mueller report going forward is we are going to see 50 more instances of obstruction, where everybody sitting around this table, I'm going to assume this is a relatively blue table, are going to go, that's disgusting. And the collusion, at the very least, it was immoral quid pro quo, and we are going to be outraged the way we are. If we were sitting around a round table, somewhere those people who live between that 37 45%, they are going to feel exactly the same way before the report came out. You know what? They're out to get him. He's stiff-arming him. I would do the same thing. And from a political point of view, and once again, we need to see every word, and we know it's going to be a vile display. Having said that, and we already have a precursor with just the 1/10 of 1% bump, politically, it's not going to make a difference. And I think that's something as the Democrats move forward to 2020. We've got to, beat the drums on this, and we've got to continue to get it out there. But I do not think. Let me just finish, Joe. Let me just finish. Joe, let me finish. I can't finish. Joe, by the way,
Let him finish.
he was in
Come
Congress.
on.
Joe, by the way, I have to say something. The great thing about doing the show is you learn. Who knew you were in Congress? I mean, can you regale us with tales of you sitting between Newt and Bill? Because that's the great thing. You learn every day on this show. But just to finish my point, I do not believe politically, no matter where this report goes, we are going to move a voter in either direction. With one caveat, I do think as we get closer to 2020, there is going to be what I call investigation wear out, where a lot of people towards me. Well, I'm talking as we go to the polls that are just going to go. I just don't. Either way, enough. But I just think from a political point of view, we're heading to a somewhat non-event.
The other thing I'll say, Willie, is that that one of the worst things you can do in politics is oversell. And Donald Trump has oversold the findings of the Mueller report before the Mueller report even comes out. And I do think if this information comes out and it is as negative as it appears to be, and it seems like Barr was covering up for the president, or at least trying to whitewash some of the nastier facts, I think that does have an impact. Maybe not with a wide swath of Americans, because a wide swath of Americans do not care about this Russian investigation, but they do on the margins. And by the way, Donald Trump won Wisconsin on the margins. He almost won Minnesota on the margins. He won Michigan on the margins. He won Pennsylvania on the margins. Those margins have tightened up even more. So actually, this could have an impact on some voters who just say, my gosh, this guy, his attorney general's lying to us now.
Well, the Democrat doesn't need too many votes. Remember, he needs about 78,000 more votes than Hillary Clinton got last time, and the election goes the other way. So if there are enough of those people who do care, then that's an issue that they may vote on. But I think Donnie's right, which is that we talked about this a couple of weeks ago before the report came out as we were waiting for it. It's almost baked in already. If you're for Donald Trump, you buy the narrative that this has been a witch hunt, that there was no collusion. You're in on that. You believe that people are out to get the president who you voted for. If you're on the other side of it, you believe that the president was in bed with Vladimir Putin and was somehow, regardless of what Mueller found, based on what we know publicly from media reporting, you believe he was colluding, or that people on his campaign were working with the Russians to give him an unfair advantage to beat Hillary Clinton. So that's baked in. That doesn't move. So who are those people in the middle that you're talking about? I think that makes a difference.
Well, you know, Willie, what could make a real impact is the report is released. Everybody reads the report. And in the House of Representatives, they look at the obstruction portion of the report and they say, well, there wasn't enough of Bob Mueller here to do something, but we're going to do something. And they start impeachment proceedings in the House based on the information that is released.
But then that goes nowhere.
And then it's a whole new ballgame in terms of exhaustion.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.